Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.
Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
Welcome back to Word Docs. I'm Sean. I'm here with Alex and Amy. We're lecturers in creative writing, senior lecturers, some of us. Or are we all senior lecturers?
What am I? I'm a junior?
What am I?
A lowly lecturer.
I'm a lowly lecturer. I'm the guy they wheel in when they've got no one else.
There is no such thing as a lowly lecturer. And just as there's no such thing as a lowly writer. We're all winners.
Or
welcome.
as Hemingway says, we're all apprentices.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Did he say that when he was really drunk?
Probably. At Raffles in Singapore, Martini. I think the quote is, we are all apprentices in a craft where no one becomes the master.
Oh, that's a great line. It's very true. Yet we are here to share our collective wisdom on various aspects of writing with you, dear listener. Today, we're going to follow on from a derailment from the last episode. We got stuck talking about ideas and creativity, so we thought we would concentrate solely on that topic today. Does that sound all right?
That sounds fantastic. And it's going to be a regular thing, I think. Derailments that become...
Be ready for it.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's right, because...
there is no track.
there is no track. So today, we're going to talk about where our ideas come from. Hooray!
Which, as we said last time, is the number one question, always.
That's right. Do you have a go-to answer for that? Or
I still get stumped. That's one of those weird questions you should be prepared for, but I'm always like, I don't know. I don't know where ideas come from.
I always make people angry if I try and respond to that question.
Only when you respond to that question.
I generally make people angry. That's just the agony of being. But when I answer that question, I think the answer is so alien it frustrates people, I think.
what is your alien answer?
Because I think they want a concrete answer. And my answer is, again, I'm going to say the word weird, take a shot.
If the drinking game started early.
The drinking game started early is that I think I'm quoting a friend of mine who said it's like exercising demons. So I think these ideas kind of rush into your brain, and putting them down on paper is like an exercism. But if I say that to people, people will go, A, you're mad, B, that's not terribly constructive, and C, you're hiding something.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think what we're hitting on here with our kind of inarticulate noises is that it's intuitive. There's and what's weird about doing creative writing at a university, you can take another shot, is that we have to explain it to people. You have to stand there and explain what you're doing or write it in an exegesis, and actually some of it is deeply inexplicable. Some of it is just this feeling.
As a friend of mine likes to say, writing is one of those weird things that's...
we've all said it now.
That's right. It's a combination of left brain and right brain activities. And I don't really believe in the separation of the brain working that way, but it is an analytical and a deeply intuitive process.
Yes.
And I think this question of where do ideas come from speaks to the inexplicableness. I think another thing we're going to be doing every week is
making
inventing new words.
Inventing words, that's fine.
Just like Shakespeare.
So it's sort of,
just like Shakespeare.
That's correct.
You can put that as the tagline for the show.
It's an absurd question, where do ideas come from? And it deserves an absurd answer in a way. Harlan Ellison used to say, a famous science fiction writer and editor, used to say, well, there's an old lady who lives in Schenectady, and whenever I run out of ideas, I slip a $5 into an envelope, send it to her, and it comes back with ideas in them, which is a nice way of saying it's a ridiculous question. But
except that it is really interesting, the more I'm thinking about it. It's really about the stages of writing. So when you talk about editing, that's really logical, and you are more in analytical thinking practices.
Depending on the stage of editing, maybe.
Yeah, but I think first draft is a mix of things. But what we're talking about is the pre-writing stage. That pre-writing stage is a really dreamlike, inarticulate stage. It's not at the word stage. There's no words attached to it when I think about it, and I think that's why it's hard to explain to people. It's this very daydreamy, amorphous, drifty stage stage that feels very intimate and very private, and it's very hard to share that with a complete stranger who says...
It's a play space, really. You're going... I mean, I've said this before, but you're going back to childhood, daydreaming, play acting.
Except very privately on the inside.
But you're doing it on the inside because we're adults now and you're...
Not supposed to.
You're not supposed to do that thing. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Apparently,
yeah. That's what the police told you.
But you can be shot down so easily at this stage. Some people don't. Some people, I do know writers who are very happy to share their early ideas. I am not one of those. I am not one of those people. I find I have to really protect my kind of amorphous. Sue Wolf calls it loose construing. Have you read that book,
yes.
The Mystery of the Cleaning Lady, where she talks about loose construing and tight construing ideas? And loose construing ideas is that really loose thinking where you're just kind of letting your mind wander and letting your intuitive thoughts happen. For me, that's where the early fizzy, exciting bit of ideas happens.
So the question, I mean, ideas then come from you, really, but it's sort of a state of mind in which you can generate ideas. So what do you guys do to enter that state, to remain in that state? How do you stimulate your creative muscle?
This is another weird story, but
We need a thesaurus for the next episode.
I need to come up with different words. But when I turned 21, a friend paid for me to visit a psychic. Let me be very clear, I do not believe in this stuff, but it was a fun thing to do when you're 21st. And I met this wonderful woman who I think was deeply intuitive. I will go that far. And she said, you are inspired by music and nature. And that, then she made all sorts of predictions about the future. But
music in nature? Or music and nature.
Sorry.
Okay.
So
you're not a pan spirit with your pan pipe.
Well, yeah. But nearly everything I've ever written has a storm in it. Nearly everything I've ever written has a storm in it. And I can't quantify that other than to say I like storms. And the other thing is I think Spotify playlists, or prior to that I had a CD player that would rotate 4 CDs. So I think music's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Huge part of it.
For me too.
Yeah. I need time, I think, unstructured time. And I think it's getting harder to block out the noise, maybe with social media and my phone and Facebook and Spotify and whatever's going on and being a busy person. But the really exciting stuff comes when I've got time. So the shower, this is a bit intimate, but the shower is a big one. And I've read stuff about positive and negative ions and running water being, so the beaches and rivers and rain and might be the storm thing as well, actually do have an effect on you and your creativity. So they say running water and creativity is big. So a lot of people have ideas in the shower.
So do I. But I find that I get ideas. So I've never thought of it that way. I think of it in terms of when I'm in the shower, it's impossible to be doing anything else but being in the shower.
You get to daydream.
Well, that's right. Just like when I'm doing the dishes, I get ideas when I'm doing the dishes.
Running
or when
water.
I'm driving. Well, that's running water too. But driving is another great way to get ideas because there's nothing else you can do but drive, and the mind wanders and starts to free associate. And
that's good because I live a long way from work too, so it takes me about an hour to drive to work, and I listen to music and daydream. They're my best. And if I listen to a podcast, no ideas. I'm just listening to the podcast.
So when you say time, when you say you need time, you don't need very much time.
No,
that's useful because we talked last time about deadlines, and we've had terrible deadlines. If time meant 6 months to waft about in your garret, taking laudanum and reading Keats, you're not going to meet any of those deadlines. But we're talking half an hour in the shower, 10 minutes in the shower.
Yeah, minutes. And I think if you're stuck, it's not a bad idea to just take a minute and just go sit outside in the sun or listen to some music, or just take a minute to drift. And I think boredom is helpful too. Like if you're ever bored somewhere, that's when I get ideas. I've had a lot, I should not say this, but I've had a lot of ideas in really boring lectures or really boring conference presentations or really boring seminars where I sit there with my notebook and I just doodle and I come up with ideas because I'm a bit bored.
It's interesting too that one of the things I've learned fairly recently is that is working time and that's okay.
Yes.
Because I used to think I'm just slacking off. I'm doing the dishes and daydreaming. Dishes is another one for me as well. Or, I go for long walks on the beach and think this isn't work, particularly if my parents are visiting, you're not working. But I think it is important because then that manifests not long after as something that you're going to write down. And so I've learned to actually be a bit kinder to myself in that way and go, actually, this is valid.
Yeah.
because there's no point sitting in front of an open laptop if you haven't done that.
Exactly.
That's right.
The other one for me that's really big is movies. I
Yes.
love watching movies as a way of kind of refilling the world. It's just that magic kind of thing of being immersed and in the dark and watching someone else's daydream.
That line, refilling the well, is so important. I find reading very
me too.
important to my creative process. It sort of changes the way I write. It fills my head up with ideas and stories, and I find that very powerful. And dreams too. Dreams are, it's the ultimate free associative state, the ultimate in loose construing. And I like to say, although it's probably not true, that all my best ideas have come from dreams. So the book I'm editing at the moment came from a dream a year and a half ago. Man, it's going to be a book in 6 months.
Do you find them hard to catch though?
Oh, yeah. So ideas for novels. I mean, I learned eventually from writing many excellent beginnings for stories that had no endings that when I get an idea that I think is for a story, it's like when you wake up in the morning and you try to explain to somebody, I had this amazing dream and it was about a three-legged Hitler on the moon and there was somebody else there. My mum was there and then suddenly everybody was in Spain. And you realize very quickly that dreams are just impressions of stories and are full of holes. And I learned very quickly that when I had an idea for a story when I was younger and I started writing it, I would eventually hit one of the holes and fall in. So I'll make a note and gradually the idea will kind of accrue until it's ready. But we might talk about that in a sec.
It's like making bread, right? Where you have to let it prove and you have to let the yeast double in, like the dough double in size. It's that kind of thing, right. I think, with an idea. The initial idea is so small, really. You might think it's big, but it's not.
I'm nodding, but the idea of me making bread is so...
I do a lot of procrastination. So when I have a deadline, so I did sourdough with the last deadline. I got into making sourdough, and I've like everyone on social media is like, "Oh, you bake bread?" It's like, no, I don't. I did it while I had a deadline.
So the idea was to catch you close to deadline. There might be cupcakes and
in fact, my partner, like, he works at a pub, and last time I got into hot cross buns the year before when I had a deadline around Easter, and I was making all these buns. I don't bake, by the way. It's like a joke that I don't bake, and Johnny would turn up to work with trays of stuff, and Finn, who actually drew our logo, would go, "Amy on deadline again?" Yes, she is.
Fantastic.
Oh, I love cooking.
But so I can do some sourdough metaphors here to talk about ideas because they do seem to grow. And Stephen King has a line I thought was really good, which is that a novel is so complex and big that it really is when three ideas come together.
Yes.
That you have three separate ideas and you're like, that's good, that's good, that's good. And you think they're all separate novels. So for me, like all of us probably have 50 ideas sitting around our head at the moment of like, I could do this, this or this. And then you have the moment where a few of them line up and you're like,
it's
that's a
thing.
book.
That's right.
Yes.
Whenever I'm commissioned to write something like a short story for a collection, if it's a themed collection, that's one idea. And if it's a tight deadline and I don't have time to wait for the yeast, what's it called?
Proving.
Isn't it a plant or something? Anyway,
We're
drilling too deeply into the metaphor.
I'm the guy that burnt halloumi the other day, so...
That's not hard to do.
That improved it, though. But I have a list of all the ideas that I've kind of thought were worth writing down from the last 30 years. And I'll start off, say it's a themed
so
anthology.
organised to make a list. I need to do that.
It's a really scrappy file. But what it means is that if I have to do something, I can go reading through that list and hoping the two ideas will join together.
That's a really good idea.
Yes. And it always works. Or if it doesn't work, I'll think of something else. Just that process of, I remember that idea. I remember that, or I don't remember that. What was that about? That it's the loose construing.
Yeah.
But very organised. I've got a scatty folder of stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't have that.
Well, I have one of those too. And I have a file on my phone, and I actually found some old notepads that I used to have.
Well, see, I keep notebooks, random. Alex has had experience of this, of me trying to find a past idea in a notebook.
Yes.
We did this recently where he's like,
it was a blue notebook.
Yeah,
and it wasn't.
It wasn't a blue notebook. But Alex was like, you wrote it down. I'm like, well, it'd be in one of my notebooks. But like, it took an hour of looking through notebooks. But I tend to write stuff down and then never go back. Like, I'll be like, that will come in handy. I'll look at that again. And then I never go back and look at anything. It's just there.
Sometimes. I don't often go back and look at it. But I'd be really upset if that file disappeared.
Yeah.
Because I know there are things in there that I think might be useful. It's like a little toolbox where each tool is unique.
When you go back and you find something you wrote and you have no memory of writing it and you're like, that's good.
Yeah.
Who wrote that?
That happens occasionally, and I've also got a folder of titles, and occasionally just go, I don't know what that is, but I really want to do that.
I work that way a lot. I have a lot of titles, and I'm like, I want to just turn that into a book. What book's that going to be?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Not my current titles. I don't love my current titles, but that's.
Well, then it's like pairing an idea with a title is a whole other thing.
There are all sorts of prompts you can get online. So I'm looking at my app, Oblique Strategies, here at the moment, which will generate ideas such as discard an axiom. So if you get stuck in a story, perhaps consider that. Or
he's literally shaking
I'm
his
literally
phone.
shaking it. It came
It's
up
like
again.
a magic 8-ball.
The
is what
universe
it's
is telling
actually.
me.
Magic 8-ball.
Discard the axiom. Convert a melodic element into a rhythmic element.
That's suitable for impossible music.
It's suitable for impossible music. That's right. So there are little ways to kind of generate
but this is
creativity.
all playfulness. That's what this is.
It's all playfulness.
That's right. So when the next question, the question that stems from that is when you're in the middle of writing a play, or you're in the middle of writing a novel, and you're in that wonderful state where you can't remember the beginning and you've lost sight of the end, and you think your work is absolutely terrible, and why did I even think I could do it in the first place? Which I go through in every book.
Oh, this last book, I couldn't get out of the desert. They were lost in a desert, and I was like,
they were literally lost
in a desert.
Metaphorical desert.
No, literally lost in the desert with no water. And I was like, I would every day be like, they're never getting out of this desert. I just can't get them out of the desert. I'm stuck here.
So how did you sustain your creativity?
They're dead now.
They're dead now. That's right. And
there was no water.
New characters introduced in chapter 25. No one saw that coming.
And then their bodies were found.
That's right. So how do you sustain creativity through a long project? Or the corollary to that is, how do you sustain creativity through a long career?
Yeah, I think that you ditch romanticism. You ditch any romantic idea of what creativity feels like, because I think it doesn't feel the way you think it feels. I think we all think creativity feels like that like lightning bolt idea, or like that lovely early daydreamy drifty stage, like when you're in the shower having daydreams, or doing the dishes having daydreams, or listening to music. We think that's what creativity feels like, but actually creativity doesn't feel like that when you're in the middle of making. I think the making process is just gritty. It's like making a chair, like you're just down there hammering away.
Which is why beginnings are addictive, and why I know so many people, including myself, who have beginnings. I think you were saying that. Fantastic beginnings, and then they lose their kind of magic as they become hard work. And I think that's where the craft kicks in, and you go, okay, now I'm going to write X number of words per day to get through this.
And some days will feel inspired and feel sort of rich and full and interesting, and some days will just be a grind.
And you get them out of the desert one step at a time, or by going. 3 weeks later, they were out of the desert.
Spoiler.
But you just have to grind, I think. Creativity can be a grind, and that's okay, but I don't think that's our image of it. Our image is Shakespeare sitting there with a pen, like his little quill, writing away, all happy.
And I think it's the thing they don't say in writing courses. They don't say at the end of the day, you either do it or you don't. At the end of the day, you either get up that morning and go, I'm going to do this, or you don't.
That is the benefit of us, though. I say this to the students all the time, is that when any of us are standing up there talking to them, I am going home to grind now, and you are going home to write your assignment for me, and we're all, hey, don't pull that face, or I'm going to get the giggles. But like, we're both going home now to sit at our laptops and just type away and get it done. And so it's kind of nice being the creative arts, because we're all doing it. We're
encouraging the students through their deadlines. We're harking back to our first episode. Deadlines. They have deadlines. They have to do a certain amount of nose to the grindstone. I can't find a metaphor that doesn't have grind in it.
Grind. Now that will be our word to take a shot on. But what's really cool there, I think the take-home message from that one is about inspiration, right? Like, so Alex was saying about beginnings, is the number of students who say to me, oh, I can't write unless I'm inspired. And it's just like, well...
Some days you won't be.
No, and most of the time you're not going to be inspired. It's just like all things.
Well, if no student has said that to me yet, I'm sure they will. And maybe I'll just not turn up at the next lecture the week because I won't be inspired to teach. If it's your job, if you're approaching this with any kind of professionality or have goals in mind, you can't not do it just because you've got the vapors. You know,
or it's like being in love, right? Like when you're in love with
Yes.
someone, you're not in love with them every minute of every day. Sometimes they're annoying.
Yeah.
And then you still act with love because you know that you love them. And we
Yes.
know we love writing. Some days we don't. Some days it's just hard work. But you do it because you know that it will reward you in the end.
So when it comes to teaching, we're not teaching creativity. We're not teaching them how to enter that state. We're teaching our students how to negotiate the complex relationship that we have with that state.
Absolutely.
With our writing.
I think good friends are important too, right? People around you who know what you're doing and check in. I mean, we sort of started to do that now with each other, kind of, you know, where are you at with that? You know, not that it's necessarily, but I think it's good to have people around you who just go, oh, that thing you said you were going to do, how's that going? Or, you know, not in a nasty way or a accusatory way. Have you done that yet? But I think it's really good to have people around that you're aware of each other's projects and you check in. I think is important.
What's interesting too, other people's creativity is fascinating. I mean, I am, unlike Amy, somebody who loves talking about my early ideas because I think it always makes them better if I can get them out.
My partner does too. He talks about them all the time. I was like, I'm not sharing. I'm not telling you because you say something rude and then I'll be all deflated and I won't do it.
Well, my collaborator, Garth Nix, doesn't tell me about anything that he's working on except in the broadest possible terms. So the first time I actually know anything in detail about it is when the ARC arrives on my doorstep and I go, this is what you've been working on a year ago. You know, it's so exciting. And but I'm not like that. And there's no right way to do it. But I love knowing what other people are doing, which is why I like talking with you guys. I like being on assessing on grants rounds or being mentors or working with our students because they've all got such great ideas and their process, watching them learn how to bring this stuff out into the world, I find really interesting. That wasn't really a question. That hasn't led anywhere. So
absolutely.
I think we're
nodding. We're nodding.
You're nodding, but where do we go from
my
there?
internal monologue is saying, Sean is wise.
Oh, no. You were asleep, I could tell. So how do you tell? Here's another question. Hopefully this will lead somewhere, unlike my last statement. When you get an idea or you feel like an idea has reached that point where it can become something, how do you know what it is? How do you know whether it's going to be a short story or a play or a novel or a novella or a film or a flash fiction or a haiku or an experimental piece of electronic literature or any of these things that we do?
It's interesting because we all do a lot of different things, but do you think you have a natural, because I'm a natural novelist, I think. My ideas are either really huge, like really hard to contain to less than 100,000 words, or my short stories are really short. So a short story I know is a short story because it's really one idea, like one really tight idea, whereas the novels are really sprawly.
Well, I've sort of become a little bit interested in cross-media stuff anyway, or you know, like taking a novel and making it to a screenplay or vice versa. So sometimes I've thought, actually, I got it wrong. I've written plays where I've gone, that wasn't a play.
Because you're doing that now.
That was
you're
a
turning...
book. Yeah, and other times and I'm doing that now. But also, sometimes you're doing it to see if it can be done. You go, I think this was a screenplay, but can I make it a novel? And other times you write things and go, that I put that in the wrong box. And
Have you
I felt
ever
that
forced
before.
it, like, knowingly? Have either of you gone, well, I've said this is going to be a novel, so this is going to be a novel, even though it doesn't feel like it should be, or a play and it feels like it should be something else?
I think I've done a couple of plays and gone, they were books. A couple of unpublished plays of mine that were okay, but they were actually too big for what they were. And, you reflect on them afterwards and you go, actually, what I was trying to do was this thing, but the opportunity was to do this other thing.
I've had a couple of ideas I thought were novels, and then they just sat there, and then I realised actually they're just short stories. They're just a really intense short story where I know all this backstory that will never be on the page. What about you, Sean?
I've changed genres. I was given an idea by my agent who said, John Wyndham's Day of the Triffids, fantastic story about everybody in the world going blind. I grew up loving John Wyndham, so I agreed with him. He said, I want somebody to write a book about everybody in the world going deaf because then we could do a silent movie and, it'd be fantastic. And I said, that's a great idea. Maybe I'll start working on it. So I did start working on this particular book. I worked out the crisis. I worked out the setting. I worked out my 4 principal characters. I wrote 15,000 words of sample chapters. I had a detailed synopsis. I had everything ready to go. We sold the book. And then I kind of lost interest in it. And over many years, I realized that that wasn't the right book for that idea. And one of the main characters, who was a musician, musician who had lost his hearing became more and more interesting to me. So this sort of very almost dystopian kind of end-of-the-world scenario novel became my last book, Impossible Music, which is set in South Australia and set in the present day. No science fiction, no world disasters, except from the point of view of the main character, who's a musician who loved music but now can't hear it.
And is that partly because the psychological journey was so strong it didn't need anything else?
I think so, yeah. And because I love music. I mean, music
was your first love.
Was my first love, and I really wanted to explore that space. And experimental music has become a great love of mine too. So the idea of music that had no sound, impossible music, just became so fascinating for me that it squeezed out everything else.
Everything else fell away.
Everything else went away.
Yeah.
And I could probably still write that book if I had to. If somebody put a gun to my head and said, "Can you finish this book that you started?" I go, "Oh, yeah, all right." But it'd be a different experience. I'd feel like I'd be ripping off my own work.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Which is something I wanted to ask you about. Is it okay to not rip off your own work necessarily, but rip off other people's work? I mean, are there any new ideas left? Is it okay to borrow from other people?
I think you're always inspired, even if you don't realise it. There's always those seminal works that you go back to. It's really interesting looking at your work and noticing the patterns.
Yes.
And thinking, I hadn't realised, but that's where that comes from.
That's my Larry Niven short story. That's my Stephen King novel.
Yeah. I sometimes look at things, particularly TV shows, and you think it's going one way and it goes somewhere else, and you go, I liked it. I thought it was going to go the other way. Then you go, that's something I can do, because it's not the same idea. It's perhaps the same or a similar setup, but it's going to go somewhere different. And that happens quite often where I go, or I'll watch the trailer of something and go, I don't really know what that is, but I'm going to imagine it's this. And it's never anything close to what the trailer was actually for. So sometimes in a kind of choose your own adventure way, where you go, I like that general space, but I want to go over here with it. And they went over there with it, I think is...
Yeah. One thing I've always wanted to do, this is so nerdy, I always loved Ivanhoe when I was a kid. Like, it's such a schlocky romance, right? If you
say
read
that as though it's a bad thing.
I love that stuff. But Sir Walter Scott, right? I always wanted to rewrite it, so he ended up with Rebecca at the end. I just thought it was like the wrong choice, Ivanhoe. I know that she's a Jew and you can't be married to her in that time, but you should just do it.
That's right. Love conquers all.
That's right, except he wouldn't have, I'm sure. But I would love to do that one day in some other form. It would be amazing.
Yeah, fantastic. So we've been talking about creativity and ideas. We're talking about books we would like to do. How in the immediate future are we going to use the things we've talked about in the work we're doing at the moment? What have we got planned?
I need to take my own advice is what I need to do. I really need to just take some daydreaming time. I'm tired at this end of the year. I think I've finished so many projects and I'm on the tail end of so many projects. What I would like to do is go watch some movies, listen to some music. If anyone's got good recommendations, send them my way.
You could buy some of my music. It's terrible.
But also just take some downtime, like to sit in the sun, look at the world, and just...
Free associate.
Yeah, free associate. That's going to be my goal.
Yeah, great. Alex?
Weirdly, oh God, you did it again. Weirdly, I think for me, perhaps the opposite at the moment, which is start treating it more like a job and get into a routine and go follow my own advice, but say I will write 1,000, 2,000 words today, regardless of what happens, and get into that
so
space.
You're on deadline.
Yeah, well, I'm self-imposed, but I think I've got a play to finish, so I could do that first. But then I think actually getting up in the morning, getting into a routine and knuckling down, because I don't have the excuse of having papers to mark. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. So to close, I've got open on my phone now.
Wait.
Oh, sorry.
You don't escape these.
Yes, that's true. Okay, well, that's true. That wasn't intentional, not consciously intentional. I am going to Dublin early next year to research a new novel, and I have one idea for it, and I need to start working out what the other ideas are. So while I'm doing all sorts of other forms and stuff, I'll have that ticking away in the back of my brain.
Excellent.
There's always something there, or a few things usually.
And
There's
he
a
gets
couple
to
of other books.
escape the summer and go back to the cold.
I cannot
He
wait.
always wants to do.
So what I was going to say before you rudely caught me up on my
Weirdly caught
slackness,
you up.
I have a thesaurus open to weird, and I wanted to pick a synonym that isn't weird.
I can't say kinky repeatedly. I think that's...
No, well, just to close off this episode, let's while you're thinking, I would just like to thank Tom Young, our producer. I'd like to
Thank you.
record thank Flinders University, on whose grounds we are recording this podcast, and the pilot,
We'd like to thank the Ghana people.
past, present, and future.
Thank you very much.
So,
I like curious or kooky.
curious or kooky?
I'm feeling like the Addams Family's going to kick in
Yeah,
now.
I actually had that in my head.
These are a lot fit your witch books.
I know
Spooky, eerie,
mysterious,
unnatural,
supernatural,
flaky.
flaky. I think.
Flaky,
I
flaky's a
can
good
own
one.
flaky.
You can own flaky, and I like preternatural. So,
Uncouth.
uncouth. Have a weird week, everyone. Happy writing. Cheers.
Happy writing.
Happy writing.
Why don't you write when you don't need money? All your notes sound alike too much. All of them start with I love you, honey, but they end with the same old touch. Just for a change, send a nice loving letter and cut out that please remit. Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
That's it. There's silence. That's
all we've got.
I'll edit that little silence out.
Oh, you keep it. It's natural, right? That's what we like in person.
And these are the kind of things we edit out of the book.
Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.